Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. So, you know what? Speaking of learning something today, this is going to be. I want to give you a heads up. If you feel, I hate this word, but I'm going to use this word at any point in time triggered. You know what? Listen at whatever you want, but this is a topic that needs to desperately be talked about because this topic is a topic that I personally have struggled with in my lifetime. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Betsy Holmberg is here to chat with me today because we can build a better world if we just get it out in the open and talk and become a community. Dr. Betsy Holmberg is an award-winning psychologist, author, and speaker. She ran the mental health service line at McKinsey Company and a global consulting firm. At Harvard, she conducted research on non-suicidal self-injury and suicide. Betsy received her PhD in psychology from Duke University. So we're going to bring Dr. Betsy in. I'm super, super grateful for your time, Dr. Betsy, because we have too many people that don't live the life they deserve to live because they feel like they're alone in this. And I want everybody to know you are not alone. I promise you, you are not alone. So let's have a little fun first before we dive into the deep. First of all, you had me at Betsy. I love the name Betsy, and this is going to be something like your mom. I don't know. Is that short for anything, or is that full name?
It's short for Elizabeth, and I'm named after my grandmother, and we've all been Betsy's, and for some reason, it fits.
It does. It does. My youngest sister is named Elizabeth. I think I mentioned that when I first met you, and we always called her Little Bit. So because she's this just like dynamo, little tiny person. So I'm going to step back, and I would love for you to introduce who is Betsy.
So, really, I am a seeker. I am someone who has spent my entire life reading, trying to understand things, wanting to learn more. This is why I went into psychology because I thought, how cool is this? This is an opportunity for us to learn who we are and why we do the things we do. And so I'd say that's one side of me. And then the other side of me is I'm just a total lover. I just want to love on dogs. I want to love on kids. I just love being there and supporting and enabling, little beings. I think it's really fun. So that's who I am in a nutshell.
And multi-generational Betsy. I do love that. It's such a nice traditional name. Let's go into what you do because, as I alluded in the opening, this may not be a light subject for some. And first off, Dr. Betsy, what is the hotline? There's a hotline in the United States. If people are troubled, what is that hotline?
988 is the hotline, and you call that and you can immediately talk to someone. And it is the most important step you can do if you are having thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore, feeling you don't deserve to be here anymore, feeling completely overwhelmed and like it is too hard. The best thing you can do is to talk to someone else. And so the beauty of a hotline is it is confidential. So if you feel the people in your life would not be receptive to that conversation, call them because they 100% are. And my hypothesis is that these thoughts and these feelings are so much more prevalent in our society than we have ever given credit for. And we all suffer inside by ourselves, and we all walk around feeling that we're damaged and we're a risk. And if we all start actually discussing it, we're going to start to realize that this is actually something rather natural that the brain does, and it's something for us to manage, and it's something that we can work through and work with, and we don't have to be defined by.
So, because this is not I want to dive into this. Uh, a little bit deeper as to how you came to this position as a speaker and author in this subject, and we're going to go into this subject a little bit deeper, but I do want to keep on the back burner. I do want to ask you how you, as a female and an entrepreneur in this market, how you're reaching out to people. But let's first dive in a little bit on what you do and where you're at in, in speaking on this.
Yeah, so I have kind of built the bits of this entrepreneur lifestyle over the course of my career. So, starting out with conducting research at Harvard, learning how to conduct research, learning how to write about research, publishing it, and then moving into McKinsey, where you are working with organizations and you are speaking to, hundreds of people. So that was the speaking side of it. So I got to kind of build those skills. And then what happened is actually I became a mom and I really wanted to devote myself to his early development. And so I kind of gave it all up, if you will, and went into the mom role. And then over the course of the mom role, which we will talk about coming up, I realized that that we need to be talking about something, which is the science of our thoughts. And learning about this science completely revolutionized how I feel about myself, how anxious I am, how sad I am, how quickly I bounce back. And it was so revolutionizing for me. Even though I'm a total homebody and a total introvert, I'm like, I actually have to get out there and I need to now share this with others because I want them to know what I learned by going back into academic research.
You're an introvert. See, I would have never guessed that. I would have never guessed that because you have to engage so much, right? But maybe
And we're
that's where
really
the
drained. Yeah,
but
we're
that's
really drained at
where
the end of it.
oh, are you? See, and I get energized by people. And so, but I find that interesting. Science of thought. Walk me through that because I'd like to know a little bit more. What is science of thought?
Okay, here's the nugget, guys. So, when I was in undergraduate psychology, they put a picture up of an iceberg and they're like, this is a person and 25% of the iceberg is visible. And those are what you're saying and those are your behaviors and your facial expressions, everything that's visible to the outside world. And then they said 75%, this is really what makes you up and these are your thoughts, these are your feelings, these are your values, these are your beliefs. And this is what we study. And I loved that freaking iceberg because I thought, oh my gosh, like this is what I really want to spend my life looking at. Well, then I continue living life and I realized that there's a lot in that iceberg that is unpleasant. And what it is that we think that our thoughts all come from us. They all come from the same place and they're all ours. We own our thoughts. Like we see our internal dialogue as something like us essentially narrating our own lives. And what I didn't get is we don't have one thought network, we have two. And the first thought network is the one you control, which is when you choose to focus on something, when you choose to go after a goal, when you choose to solve a problem. The second thought network is like a stress system. And comes all the way back when we were cavemen. I call it the tribal brain. And it is monitoring the environment to see, to make sure that you're okay and you're understanding what the clan norms are and you're doing things the way you should be. And it's essentially trying to keep you from dying, from being kicked out of the clan. So, what this network cares about is fitting in, performing, and pleasing. Am I fitting into the group well enough? If I don't fit in and I get kicked out, death, right? Am I performing? Am I doing my role the way the clan needs me to? Because if I don't, that's risky. And then pleasing. Am I pleasing the other people around me? Am I if they're asking me to do something, am I saying yes? Because that's the way you stay safe. And so these thoughts are automatic. They're like a burp. They are a blink. These things are happening. They are like a stress response. They happen to us. They aren't us. And so when we start to see these thoughts as separate from us and something we manage and not something that bubbles up from within our soul, if you will, it completely shifts how we look at ourselves and how we talk about ourselves.
There's different theories around kind of like the negative thoughts, right? The negative thoughts are derived from our survival as children. So, don't touch that, it'll burn you. But then when you become, a 32-year-old adult and you have failed at a business or you perceived fail, right? It could actually be feedback, folks. You then implement that don't touch, it'll burn you thought process that you learned when you were two, right? So I find that really interesting that you talk about the two thought networks, one of choice and one of tribal. And I've witnessed this a lot because I am an automatic networker. What most people don't know is they see me go into a room and then they go, I don't know how you do it. You talk to everybody and you always leave with a friend or you always leave with new business or something's always going on. What they don't know is when I leave that room and I go home and it gets quiet, every conversation I had goes through my head and I wonder, I'm not as smart as them. I'm not as quick as them. I bet I said something stupid. Oh my God, I was an idiot there. And this is the dialogue that goes through my head, folks. After every conversation in a networking event, I literally tear myself. So I have I have remorse. I don't have fear to engage. I have remorse afterwards. So when we're looking at this and we know that these types of thoughts, this fear, uncertainty, this dysregulation within society and our natural kind of what's going on. And the world is like, it's crazy. The last 10 years have been so hard. They have been so stressful on everybody. I don't think there's anybody out there who hasn't experienced stress over the last decade. What are some of the ways that you can catch yourself and
Okay.
stop that? Because that's far more disruptive than anything else. Is that
Just
internal?
to start off, love your honesty. That is your tribal brain in action. And what it's doing is one of the primary things it does is it compares. It's constantly comparing you to everyone else. And this is how humans originally figured out clan norms. It actually served a really cool purpose way back when, which is if we saw someone doing something really good, like let's say sewing animal pelts together to create a big blanket to sleep under, and they were warmer, we were like, cool, I want to do that. And then we did it. And the standard of living raised for everyone. But we have grown out of needing this network because now we go into a networking event and we come out and we're then comparing ourselves when we're comparing up. We're comparing to everyone we think is doing better than us. We don't really know if they're doing better than us, but we perceive that they are because we still have that evolutionary drive to try to make a warmer blanket, even though central air exists nowadays, you know?
And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, exactly. And we're only seeing what we want, what we want to see. You know, we like to put people on pedestals. I mean, that's what we naturally do. So this to stop this thing, there are a few ideas. First is to label it back. So it likes to label you. It likes to call you a loser. It likes to call you uneducated. It likes to call you damaged. And what you're going to do is say, that's my tribal brain. So this is the way I label it. And for the entrepreneurs out there, maybe this will resonate. So I see myself as the CEO of me. And I've got some kick-ass employees. I love my eyes. They rock. I love my ears. I love my senses. Like, those are great employees. But I have this employee that sits in my office and just complains about office politics and talks about how bad we are and like always has this nasty theme. And I have to listen to it. And I'm being polite and I'm listening to it and I'm getting nothing done. And so I say, you know what? Go back to your cubicle and get back to work. Like, this conversation's over. And I make them leave and I get to shut my door and actually focus what I want to focus on. Right. So play it however you want to call it. People call it different things. I had one lady I love. She's like, it's the Real Housewives of me. And I was like, yes, it
Oh my
is.
God.
Exactly. And so when you start, and so like, here's another example. So my father will completely tune my mother and I out when we talk. Granted, we talk for a long time and he just shuts us down. And so, like, for some people, it's that same sense of just ignoring, like my dad ignores my mom and I. It's just in the background, rah, 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 and you don't listen to it. So, whatever it is, label it. and recognize when it's there. Then the second thing to do is focus somewhere else. And this could be focusing on how pretty the sky is. This could be focusing on your work presentation. It could be focusing on the next step to getting your goal done, whatever it is. If it's another Instagram post, if it's learning how to do, more marketing, whatever it is, just tackle that next goal. When you refocus, it shuts it down. So this is what the science shows between these two networks. One, either your CEO brain is going or your tribal brain. They can't go at the same time. They're either
Yeah.
or. So the second you focus somewhere, you shut this down. Essentially, that's what meditation is. That's why meditation is so powerful. And you now
Brilliant.
it is what it is.
Well, and I have heard that many times. You cannot have a negative and a positive thought at the same time. You literally, your brain cannot process both thoughts at the same time. I love that that whole CEO analogy because and we won't give her a name because I think poor Karen has just been totally.
I
Linda
know.
and Karen have just been brutalized over the last few years. We want to give them a break. Um, When when is because I know that you you work within the field of suicide and understanding what leads to that. And I think that's very important. My husband's part of a men's group called K4 Men, and they deal a lot in this. And a lot of it comes from the founder's own personal experience within his family with that. When is talking and sending that internal voice back to your cubicle, when is that not enough? When are the signs they should be paying attention to? Because I'm going to promise every single person out there, you are needed, you are important, you need to be here. So when should they say, okay, I can't get this voice to shut up?
Yeah, it's kind of a reframe. So it's not that we need to start listening to it, it's that there are times when it will be impossible to shut it down because this is our more primitive thought network and our brain is like an inventory system. So the last one that's developed is the first one that's out. And so our focus brain, our most sophisticated brain, that was the last one to develop. It's the first one to kick the bucket. And so if you're tired, if you're stressed or if you're really emotional, your brain will literally shut down your ability to focus and it will let the tribal brain run wild. And so this is where we have to be very thoughtful with ourselves in these moments. And I would like to take a moment to try to reframe suicide. So the concept of a suicidal thought, and now having gone through it myself, having seen what it is. So the tribal brain cares about fitting in, right? It really recognizes who's in the in group and who's in the out group. Who is my enemy? Who's someone I need to fight or hide from or run away from? And who are the people I'm collaborating with? And if we feel we get enough data points from the external world, whether we're comparing and feeling like we're falling short, or we feel fundamentally different from other people around us, and any ways that we feel we're being outgrouped, if you will, the more data points we get like that, we can start to get to that place of feeling like, well, then maybe I should just, the way I think about it is like an animal who is sick, who goes into a forest and removes themselves from the pack in order to die so they don't bring everyone else down. This is essentially what we are doing when we have a suicidal thought. So the most important thing we can do is actually reach out to our loved ones who can then in-group us again and show us that we do matter. We are important because every single one of you listeners, everyone is. And there's so much you're bringing to the world that no one is saying, that you're not really seeing, but that's there. And so we often can't see that because our tribal brain has the floor. But the more you can then talk to people and get outside and feel that connection again, then these thoughts may start to dissipate. But these thoughts do not have to define you at all.
I 110% agree. I want to layer in some of the challenges women face. You talked about being tired. You talked about the self-doubt. You talked about a lot of these pieces. And then we layer in social media. And like I always tell people, I'd love to show you my six pack, but it's in the fridge. So not going to happen. Y- the reality is I have found in having 140 conversations in the last year, like literal deep conversations like this, I have found a few things that we all have in common. No matter how thin, fit, young, blonde, beautiful, they all see those faults within themselves. They never feel. So I have found that we all have one thing in common is that we don't feel that we have anything in common. Um, and women are underfunded typically as business owners. This is a national statistic. Last year, less than 5% of female founded businesses were traditionally funded or had JV or VC money. So now underfunded, which is stress. We tend to balance home life, be it with kids or not with kids. We tend to say that we tend to view that balance or value within our home life as part of our personal value, no matter what's going on. So let's walk through this. Let's just assume every female entrepreneur out there has a tired day, has an overwhelmed day, has a underfunded day, a frustrated day. And let's just assume this. What are some of the strategies you would talk to them about having had the corporate space in working with people? What are some of the strategies you would encourage them to implement to reset back to their focus brain from their tribal brain?
Love it. Yes. So I would often think in terms of, is it a wrong role or is it a wrong mindset? So one thing the tribal brain does is it defines a role and all it cares about is performing. This is the fit in, perform, and please. So this is the performing segment of what the tribal brain cares about. And especially for women, the standards for what we perceive our role to be. We think we need to be thin. We think we need to be beautiful. We think we need to have a perfectly clean house. We have to do all the laundry. We have to do like, you just go through all that and then work on top of it. I mean, we have given ourselves impossible roles. And on top of that, often when you're going into the entrepreneur space, there's that concept of that now you have to be a leader. And what I've seen with a lot of people is that when you think that you have to be the leader, you will beat yourself up really quickly. And what a real leader is, and this is where we need to change the archetype of leadership is having a growth mindset. It is learning to see where failures are, identify it, and pivot quickly. Your whole role is almost to try things and fail, try things and fail. And so if you're feeling down or you're struggling with something, think about it is, do I have the wrong role? Am I thinking that I need to be some perfect, wonderful leader when actually that's not really what I have to be? Like, I don't have to have a perfectly clean house. It's okay if my kids eat fast food every once in a while. Can you lighten your own standards? And then secondly, are you in the mindset that you have to have all the answers all the time? And no, that is not what leadership is. And so moving more into that growth mindset can relax some of that stress.
I absolutely 110% agree that we have to let go of some things. Like I carried and I still carry mother's guilt is a very real thing. It is a very real thing, folks. Um I still can pull up the conversations that or the anger or the frustration that I had with each of my children. And I just want to I want to let everybody know that your children are not normal if they did not need some sort of therapy when they're adults. And it's going to be all your fault. And that's okay because somebody needs to be blamed. So I'm just going to, oh, sorry. I'm just going to take that off the table. Just own it. It's okay. And if they're still coming for Sunday dinner, it means that it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. You're making it bigger than what it is. Um, when women go into networking events, because we are now out there again. So a lot of women had reprieve where we could filter everything through a screen, and now we have to go in to kind of and I don't want to even call it a lion's den. Sometimes sometimes women's events can be more like a hyena club, right? It's like, ah, right? And you're already a lot of, you got 50% introverts, 50% extroverts, no matter which side of the aisle you're coming from. You're probably already going to be somewhat dysregulated walking into these because you've got the armor on. You've already anticipated the conversations and that one person that you think doesn't like you. What are some strategies women can implement before they walk into what could be the greatest opportunity of their week, of their month, of their career? What are some strategies they can implement?
Sure. So some of the main themes that always trip us up in these events, and I have done this my entire life. I still do this and I still have to catch myself, is I am always looking at the person and thinking, am I interesting enough for them? Is there someone they'd rather be talking to in the room? And how do I keep this like how do I essentially, I feel like a little dancing monkey, like how do I perform enough that this person is interested in me, right? And we do this at networking events, we do this socially, cool moms versus when you feel like you're not a cool mom. I mean, we all do this everywhere, and so it's to recognize that that's there, and then to bizarrely just say, you know what? That's all my tribal brain. Those are all automatic nervous thoughts that are amping me up, and none of it's real. Like, I don't know what that person's thinking. And if that person, this helped me. If that person does judge me for my weight or what I look like or something like that, then that's their automatic brain judging me. And it's not really them either. So like the more powerful conversation to get to is when you can stay as still as you possibly can, and then just really listen to that person. And if you start to feel yourself getting anxious, it's like, no, that's my tribal brain. And then you just go back to really actually listening to what they're saying. And I find when I do this, I'm calmer. I'm not as amped up. And I also find I'm actually more fun in a way for them because I'm actually really engaged in what they're saying, and my mind isn't focused on this drama in my head, and we have a way better conversation and we actually connect. There's more, you can connect with people so much better when you get out of this stress cycle in your brain.
And where everything's at right now in this world, stress cycle is huge. I'm seeing this repeatedly. The stress is huge. You are not alone. I understand what you're trying to do. I do think more women need to be speaking up and leading in their field of interest, in their uh, proficiency and passion. Um, but I do like how you put that: fit in, perform, and please. Oh my God, is that like the Stepford wife?
And
Just like,
when we live, and people, this is the crime, Kim, is that people live their entire lives from this tribal brain because we were under the false assumption that that was truly who we are. So, they try to lose weight all the time, or they feel they need a bigger house, or they feel that, like, their background isn't what everyone else's background is, so they're less than. I mean, people will play their lives to try to appease this brain, when all this brain does is it's like, alert, alert, like, that's a worry, that's a worry. So it doesn't care if you actually solve it. It'll just find the next thing to alert you about because it's an alert system. It's not keeping score. It's not giving you an A plus because you lost the 10 pounds. It'll just then say, got to get dry your hair. You got to do something else. I mean, it's not meant to do that, which is why we never feel we're enough. It's why people then end up being imminently successful. And then they're like, I felt empty,
yeah.
because this brain is not the route to fulfillment, and it is not who you really are. It's not how you connect to your authentic self. So it's interesting to watch.
How much energy does the tribal brain consume?
So in studies on brain, on how many like calories essentially a brain uses, the brain can use up to 20% of your calories. Now, this goes like, take this for example, in the 1984 World Championship for chess, they had to actually shut it down because one of the guys had lost 22 pounds playing chess, and he was getting to a state where it was physically hurting him. I mean, so chess players can burn as many calories as Roger Federer can on a tennis court. So 2 hours of chess playing is equal to 1 hour of professional tennis playing. So the brain can burn us out. That's one side of it. The second side of it is that when this tribal brain is going, because it's an alert system, it creates stress responses. And so then everything gets heightened, and there's a significant amount of energy that goes into the stress cycle. So between those two, this thing is like running our lives and running our energy. And it's one way to get your energy back is to say, I'm done with you, annoying employee that like literally will only complain, and like I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to either have peace and stillness, or I'm going to focus on something. And that's it. That is all I'm going to use you for, brain. You are my tool. You are not my director,
You're the tool. And some tools are not always needed. It's like, it's what do they say? Some people, um, everything is a nail. What is that saying? Where every problem isn't like we just want to pound at it, and not everything is a nail. Sometimes it needs to be finessed like a screw, right? It has movement to it. Um, yeah. So what have I missed? Because you have such a wealth of knowledge, and I think it's so incredibly important, especially as we've just come through January, which is Blue Monday, has the highest suicide rate throughout the entire year. What I also found interesting in talking to you, remember you were talking about how the animal will separate itself. A lot of seniors pass away the first 2 weeks of January. I know that we unfortunately just lost my husband's father, and we had Christmas dinner, and he was sharp as a whip, and it was crazy, and it was it was a beautiful dinner. And then just a few weeks later, he passes. Right? We knew it was coming. It wasn't anything surprising. But what are some other things that you think that we need to be aware of, so that when we are burning out, when we are hitting those walls, that we can stop and assess, stop, drop, and roll, just like in a fire, right? Stop, drop, and roll. What are the stop, drop, and rolls that women can implement to take a gauge, maybe at the end of each day or at the end of a long week?
Yeah, for me, it's not as much something that we want to gauge on like how intense is my tribal brain or how or this. I've actually shifted how I do self-care, and it's opposite to what I thought it was going to be. So I thought that self-care was, putting cucumbers on my eyeballs and like doing a mask or something. Like it was just very traditional. And what I realized is that if it's the three nasties, if I'm tired, I'm stressed, or I am emotional, I'm going to have these thoughts, and they're not going to be great, and they're going to feel awful. And I realized that actually self-care is distracting myself. And I will watch a movie now. I will do whatever I can to try to get away from that brain when it feels almost impossible to do it. I will try to listen to music. And another thing that I would do, which I never used to do before, is prioritize your hobbies. So whatever that thing is that you just adore doing that actually does take your mind off of your life, the more you do that, the more you strengthen the part of your brain that is your focus part of your brain. These things are like muscles. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The less you use it, the weaker it gets. So the more time you spend doing things you love or focusing on things, then the weaker this tribal brain gets. And so that's a little aside to like when you're really feeling down. When I am in it, I'm like distract, distract, distract. And then what I find is that then when I get the sleep, when I get a little less tired, then I don't sit around thinking, oh my gosh, I had those thoughts. And like, what does that mean? And like, now what am I going to do? And now I have to fix my life because, like I used to have those thoughts a lot when Buzzy was really little. Buzzy's my kid. And it was like, do I need to be a different, do I need to really do something more professional? Am I unfulfilled? Am I one of those unfulfilled women? And like, because I'm having these thoughts, and it's like, no, they're automatic thoughts. And like, you don't have to change anything. And like, I could just let them go. And so it's, you just bounce back way quicker when you don't hold on to them and then bring them with you like this ball and chain into the next day when you finally do have rest. You actually are like, oh, I'm so glad that's over, and you put it in the past, and it's really nice.
You always know when I'm stressed. There's usually a coffee cake or pumpkin bread or something like that. I go to the kitchen and I bake, baby, and I'm hoping somebody else is around because I don't want to eat it all. I will bake and cook for anybody. Walk me through a time in your life that without that moment of resiliency, we would not be having this conversation.
So my son was 15 months old. He was toddling around the kitchen, and my husband of 2 years walks into our room, into the kitchen. I'm breading fish. I'll remember forever. And he goes, I can't do this anymore. And I was like, what? And that was the moment he decided that our marriage was over. And it had been 2 years, and it completely threw me off. And so he went into this whole legal process. And in the legal process, my lawyer had said, the law is judges are very quick to label women as withholding or aggressive or spiteful. So she's like, the best thing you can possibly do is give him every single thing he wants. I was like, okay. So I gave him everything he wanted. Any custody he wanted, I gave it to him. However he wanted to arrange us, I gave it to him. And so in the middle of this process, the judge comes back and he says, because of something that his side had misconstrued as me not supporting him, he goes, the judge says, like, essentially says to me, you need to support your ex more. And I thought, and this is where I landed on the ground, and I called my parents from FaceTime, like on the side. And I was like, so I have literally, I have given him a divorce. I've had no say in whether I'm married or not. I have no say in where my child is at any time in my life. And now I am told it's not enough. Now, this is me not performing, right? So in my tribal brain, I was like, the only solution, the only way to get this judge to essentially give me an A+ is to kill myself. If I kill myself, then that is supporting my ex's relationship with this child. Everyone gets what they want, right? And so I was like, the world is better off without me, guys. This is it. And so they did the best thing ever. They flew right out and they stayed with me. That was my in-group. I suddenly had an in-group again, right? And it was enough to keep me going. I went on antidepressants. I got help, and like that really helped. That helped shut my tribal brain down. And so this moment stuck with me so hard that 3 years later, every time I tried to go off of my antidepressant, these thoughts would come back up, and it'd be like, you can't do this. And like, you're not a good enough parent for your child. How are you going to make money and be a single mom? How are you going to give him what he needs? Like, you're failing. And it would so scare me that I'd say, okay. And I'd go back and up my dose on antidepressants again. I get right back on it. And I thought, this pill is the only thing keeping me functioning. I am so damaged that I need this. And I was like, enough. And that's when I went into the literature and I realized what this tribal brain was. That all those thoughts were this tribal brain. And I actually didn't have to listen to it. I didn't have to own those thoughts. And when I stopped owning those thoughts, everything shifted. And I titrated right off my antidepressant, and I felt great. And I don't feel damaged anymore. I realize how I got where I got. And I look back at it and have compassion for that, for what I went through, but it doesn't define me. And so this was such an awesome shift. I want everyone to know it now.
I think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I'm hearing is that you took a look inward and learned who you were. You took a moment to learn who you were so you could work with yourself. Is that kind of
You know,
an assessment
kind
of
of. So, like, I read the Eckhart Tolle of, Our Monkey Minds Are Crazy. I've read Michael Singer, all of those. I loved those books, and they really resonated with me. But I still couldn't help that nagging feeling that my thoughts are they're mine, and they're here to protect me, and they're here to and like I need them, and they're serving this really great purpose. And it was only when I could see from a neuroscience perspective why we have these thoughts that I was able to finally let them go. So it was more me recognizing who I am not, and then
okay,
getting back to who I am authentically, which is the seeker and the lover, and, like the one who
awesome.
wants to love people. That's
But
who I am.
you took a moment. You took a moment. You took that
I
time.
did. I took a good 6 months reading academic papers. I mean, I
Yeah.
that was probably my resiliency, and my resiliency came from wanting to be a better mom to my son. I wanted better for him than that. It didn't even come from me. It came from a purpose that was way bigger than me, and I was like, I'm going to fight to stop these
Yeah.
thoughts, to be there for him. So this is what you always talk about, community, and every single time I want to, like, scream, and I often do because no one can hear me. I'm like, yes, Kim, because
Yeah.
yes, I needed my parents there in my moment that was awful, and it was my son that was the thing that got me out of
Yep.
it. I mean, it is our communities
Yeah.
that make us strong and powerful.
And you have a place within that community. And I want everybody to know that. You have a place within the community. Whether or not you recognize you have a community, I promise you, you got a community. There is somebody standing out there who does want to support you, who does want to just be present while you move through. Oh, I've got a question coming from my producer. When did you know it was time to come off the antidepressants? That's a good question.
That is a great question. So I was in this literature and finally getting what these thoughts were. And it took me a week or two. I remember one time I was standing in the shower and I was thinking about my brother and sister in law. And then my tribal brain goes, well, they have lives and you don't. And I was like, you snarky little, nasty little thing. And so when I could start to separate like that, I thought, I think I've got a hold of this. And so I started titrating down, and those thoughts weren't as nasty. I think this is what I also realized is the more I understood them, the less severe they got, the less aggressive they got. And so I could titrate a little more and titrate a little more, and it was a little bit of a process, but every bit of it went the way I needed it to, which was awesome.
Excellent. So when you can start recognizing the when you can start separating that space. And folks, some people will always need because of other trauma, because the brain does require certain chemicals, certain things. It does not mean that you are less than. It just means that there are chemical balances within brain. Serotonin you're born with. It's not like it's a reoccurring. So do what's best for you, but know that there's opportunities and options. So
And
I'm
one thing
not.
to say with that is to say, don't label yourself, because you are someone who is benefits from being on an antidepressant forever. When you label yourself and call yourself, say that you're damaged or say there's something wrong with you, that's your tribal brain. And that's trying to
Yep.
alert you. And it's just dopey, it's primitive, it's outdated. Live the best life you can live with whatever supports you need, and celebrate that. And yeah.
I will be in all full transparency. When I had my third child, I went through some very serious postpartum. It got to the point where this extrovert couldn't even go to the church. Right? I couldn't even go out in my neighborhood. I was pulling back from everybody. And I was in I it started when I got pregnant and it continued for almost a year and a half. I did end up going on an antidepressant and have had to be on a very low dose my entire life. But as my God love her, my amazing Barbara Williams, who is my therapist that saved my life when I was 15, she has Kimberly Joe, you do realize that you only have X amount of this one particular chemical in your brain, and you lived in a car wreck for the first 15 years of your life. You burned through it, honey. And it's okay. It's okay to say, I'm going to give a little bit. So, folks, you do what's best for you to show up as your best self, right? That's all I'm saying. because we need you here. We need everybody here stepping into space, because we as women have to stick together. It is, it's not a us against them. It is an us collaborative to help others forward. Okay, so that's my 2 cents. I love this conversation, Dr. Betsy, because this is a very serious conversation. This is a very serious conversation. I want to talk real quickly about your book. I want to talk about books. So walk me through your book, where we can find it, and what can readers expect from your book?
So I wrote a book and then I started talking with people and realized I framed it completely wrong. So the book's not out yet. I'm in the
Oh,
process of writing it
you're still
because
in the process. Okay.
I am. And so, but what you can expect in it is I go through those case studies that I've walked through with people with the tribal brain. So if you're feeling stuck and unmotivated, we talk
Yeah.
through what the tribal brain does for that. If you feel like you're a bad mom, because I get a lot of that, like you're
Yeah.
constantly beating yourself up, we go into that. I feel like I don't fit in for whatever reason. This is a high schooler. We talk about that. And or I'm depressed, I'm anxious. We talk about how the neuroscience of depression and anxiety in this tribal brain, and then how to stop it. So there's a lot of takeaways and tips on how to think of things differently or do things differently to face, some of these big kind of life experiences that we all go through. I also talk about technology and social media because that is a tribal brain candy store. And so we walk through some of those things. And then who are we if we aren't these thoughts? So it's going to be super fun and exciting when it comes out. And you can sign up for my newsletter on my website and I will, give you guys updates on when that will be available.
And your website, let's go through that for those who are just listening in. It's let's see here. It's your name,
It
Betsy
is.
Holmberg. Can you spell that out for us? So it's
It is
www dot
BetsyHolmberg.com.
awesome. So folks, you know what? Do track this, because if not you, I guarantee you know someone. I guarantee it. It's nobody lives in a perfect world. Nobody does. All right. So, quote, give us a quote. What is inspiring you today?
Okay, so the
Hold
quote
on.
for me.
Hold on. I'm going to bring this in full screen. Give us your biggest smile and your best.
All right, so here is a quote that's really resonating with me right now. It is, nature is busy creating absolutely unique individuals, whereas culture has invented a single mold to which all must conform. It is grotesque. This is by U.G. Krishnamurti. And I love it because our tribal brains just want us to fit in, and it spends all its time trying to get us to align to what we see as culture and to perform our roles correctly for culture. And yet we are all unique individuals. We all have something wonderful to bring to the world. And the more we recognize that, the more we can be our authentic selves.
And if you want pink hair, folks, go for it. Don't wait till you're 52 to go pink. Do you. As long as you are a good neighbor to those around you and yourself, and you do no harm, you do you, because it's good enough. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you that. Dr. Betsy, I have so enjoyed this conversation. And when your book does come out, will you come back on the show and talk to us about how you launched it? And because there is an entrepreneurial side to that, how do you get a very focused message through an entrepreneurial avenue and get it out there? So I'd love to have you back once you have your book launched. Are you cool with
I
that?
can't wait to talk again. Can't wait. I
Oh,
love being with you, Kim.
you know what? You are an absolute gem. Everybody needs to have a conversation with the Dr. Betsy today. I guarantee you, somewhere in your world, you have amazing people. I promise you, because you are amazing, and amazing attracts amazing. Just give yourself a little grace there, folks. If you ever feel that your resiliency is lagging just a wee bit, I want you to go to resilientgift.com, resilientgift.com. And this is where not too often, once a month, maybe even once every other month because I haven't quite figured out the CRM yet. You're going to get our magazine. You'll get notified as to who's going to be live, who's on the podcast, all these things, just so I can help support you in your community. That's my entire goal, folks. Let's build a community together. Again, this is Kim Talks Resilience. I'm Kim Hayden, your host, and thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching, and you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is caring.